Hi, Doug Davidoff here. I'm the founder and CEO at Imagine Business Development. Anyone who's ever talked to me knows pretty quickly that I'm a huge fan of data and metrics. When I coached baseball, I loved the analytics that we were able to have. We were able to see how players were performing, and we were able to look underneath to really get the objective picture of what was going on. By combining those two things, we were able to win more games than, candidly, the talent of the team would have indicated. Now, we've got the same problem in sales. I don't know if you've noticed it, but sales is certainly very metrics driven. But the problem is the metrics that are used are really imbalanced. And further, the way that they're used also cause problems. You see, everything's weighted to the end. If you look at any blog post, any discussion, any video around key metrics for salespeople, you'll see things like sales cycle time. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most common strategic metric used. It's probably the number one metric to determine how well a sales organization is performing. Closing rates, total closed sales, cost of customer acquisition. All of those metrics are important, but all of those metrics favor and point to very end stage actions. Those metrics are really the result of something, not the cause. Right? And so what's happened is, because those metrics have dominated what we're doing and everyone's looking to improve them, we're actually weakening companies' customer acquisition capabilities. We're making sales, frankly, less effective. It's one of the reasons why, despite the movement for the professionalization of the sales role, trust in salespeople continues to go down. Most buyers would just as soon not have to deal with salespeople. Well, why is this happening? The reason is that the metrics that we're using all favor just one aspect of the customer acquisition or sales process. Think about this. What's the easiest way to shorten the sales cycle time? Don't talk to a buyer until they're absolutely ready to make a decision. Don't put them in the pipeline until the day before they make their decision. You'll have a sales cycle time of 1 day. If you meet somebody that you identify that, hey, there's a good opportunity here, there's a fit here, but I'm actually going to have to do some work. I might actually have to do some selling. I'm actually going to hurt my sales cycle time numbers. My sales cycle metrics are going to go down. Managers tell sales reps all the time, you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Don't fear rejection. But then we report on closing rates, and we celebrate those people that have higher closing rates. Now, I know that there are some advanced sales organizations that do identify when closing rates get above a certain level. That's a problem. But what's happened is we've turned the idea of sales qualified to become a virtual synonym of order ready. A good sales qualified lead still requires real work. A good sales effort still means there's the possibility that you won't win. Right. And so what's happening with the metrics that we're using is they all favor certainty, and they penalize the lack of certainty even when there's predictability that's there. Right? What's the best way to increase your closing rate? Make fewer proposals, or only make proposals when you're absolutely certain you're going to win. Now, I realize in both those cases, sales cycle time and closing rates, we don't have reps or organizations by and large that are doing it to that level of extreme. But it's not, the problem's not that we're doing it consciously. The problem is the subconscious incentive, the subconscious framing that puts all of the benefit, all of the reward only to those end stage activities. Right? For your sales organization to really maximize the value of what you're doing, to really unlock the latent growth potential that's there, you need a much more balanced approach to how you're measuring analyzing and assessing the effectiveness of your sales organization. Now, in other programs, I talk about the importance of structure. And I define structure as the design of the system, the tools that are used, and the scoreboard. Structure is the most influenceable aspect of any organizational behavior. Right? How those three things come together, that creates the structure. Structure is the invisible hand that guides behavior, that guides activity, and that guides performance. Today, I'm going to focus on a key component of the scoreboard. Now, please note, the scoreboard is not a dashboard. A dashboard is a series of metrics. Dashboards are really effective. They're geared for managers. They're geared for analysts. Dashboards are really good to help you identify key trends, help you ask the right questions, sometimes helps you confirm hypotheses. A scoreboard, well, it's a scoreboard. It lets you know the score. It's a simple number. It might be there might be some complexity in how that number gets calculated, but it's got to be boiled down to one number, and it's got to come down to a point of letting people know, am I winning or am I losing? And especially in a business context, the scoreboard that we want to use needs to be geared to drive the behaviors that cause success, not just the behaviors or the actions that manifest that success, right? Closing a sale is a metric. Closed sales is a metric that assesses the manifestation of actions, but it does not connect to the cause of action, right? What caused that sale to occur? And if you want to scale sales, if you want to increase throughput, if you want to increase the capacity of your sales team, you're going to be focused far more on the cause of success rather than the byproduct of success. So to do this, we dug deep. We looked at a whole lot. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. You've got, great explanation here on the page explaining what sales velocity is. We dug deep into how do other disciplines do this? What are they doing to be able to manage the complex activities that are the equivalent or maybe even more so than what has to happen in terms of managing a sales organization. And we created a metric that we call sales velocity. A metric that we can very comfortably say, if sales velocity is increasing, that is the single best indicator that you're going to see increased growth. And if it's decreasing, it's the single best red flag that you need to address something because growth is likely to slow down. Let's look at a couple of underlying components around the strategy of what sales velocity is, and then we'll get into examples of how we actually use sales velocity and how we calculate sales velocity. There's a term that I love. It's called resulting. It's a poker term. And what resulting basically means is it's the phenomenon when you create too tight of a relationship between the quality of the outcome and the quality of the decision that you made. So in poker, resulting occurs when you tie, did you win the hand, to did you make good decisions in the hand, right? And we need to understand the decisions that we make and the outcomes they might correlate, but they are not directly connected. They're independent. We don't control all the inputs. This, frankly, is why I like to use poker as the metaphor for business and sales, and I hate using chess. You see, if you were to result in chess, that wouldn't be a problem. So there'd be no need to create the term resulting. Because in chess, you have all of the information that you need. Chess is really a competition of computational powers, right? You can go back and identify where was the mistake made. If you lose a chess game, that means you made a mistake, or the other player was just so good that you maybe didn't make a mistake, but you just can't beat them, right? In poker, you can play the hand right and lose. You can play the hand wrong and win, right? But resulting doesn't only apply to poker, right? In poker, if you lose, you made a bad decision. And if you win, you made a good decision. Again, that's resulting. That's going to lead to bad play. That's what amateurs do. Resulting in baseball occurs when you think if I get a hit, I had a good at bat, and if I didn't get a hit, I had a bad at bat. You have no control what happens after you hit the ball. The only thing you control in baseball as a hitter is the quality of the at bat. So if you tie the outcome with the input together, you're going to make bad decisions and you're going to increasingly take bad swings and you'll experience success less frequently. In sales, resulting occurs when, hey, if we closed the sale, we won. We had a good sales process. And if we didn't close the sale, we had a bad sales process. You see, what resulting does is it makes outcomes one-off events. And you can't grow a business, you can't build a career on one-off events. It's not a question of can you win once. It's can you win predictably? Can you win repeatedly? Can you increase the probability of winning? And because those are all very, very bad behaviors, these disciplines have created different tools, different metrics to track this. In poker, they use odds and probabilities to assess decision making. In baseball, they use advanced metrics like batting average of balls in play, exit speed, barreled balls, spin velocity, OPS, all kinds of metrics to be able to assess the quality of the input to increase the likelihood of the output. And that's why what we're saying in sales is we need new metrics. We need metrics that let us quantify or track the quality of the input, not just the quality of the result. That's where selling velocity points and overall selling velocity comes together. Now, before I get into the details of sales velocity, I do want to get across one other point because you'll see this term used several times, and that is the definition of a meaningful conversation. We've analyzed thousands of sales interactions. We've analyzed hundreds of sales studies, and we've been able to boil it down to this. The single most important, if I only had one number that I could track for salespeople, it would be meaningful conversations. The definition of a meaningful conversation is a conversation where we, the selling organization, learns at least one piece of material information that enables us to personalize, contextualize, and or customize our approach to the prospect. And both parties, salesperson and lead, salesperson and prospect, commit to taking a definable action by a definable time. Right? Meaningful actions ensure that you're advancing the sales process. Meaningful actions ensure that you're improving your sales process. The more meaningful conversations you have, the more likely you are to have a positive outcome or to be able to determine earlier that it's not a match, that it's not a fit, and you can do what great poker players do more than anybody else, and that is fold. Right? The biggest mistake that salespeople make is they fold too late. As a matter of fact, most salespeople don't even know what folding is. Right? Too often, the only person that says no is the prospect. And that leads to the biggest, most costly mistake made in sales, and that is spending too much time on the wrong opportunity. Right. And by the way, any time on the wrong opportunity is too much time. So when we know that an opportunity isn't a fit, when an opportunity becomes low probability, right? A poker player is not going to chase, whole cards of 2-7, right? They're going to say, yeah, no thanks. I'm going to fold before the game even starts. And yeah, it's possible that the three flop cards come out as, 2 2s and a 7, and I could have had a full house. Wow, I made a mistake. See, that's resulting, right? The only way you win a 2-7 hand is pure abject luck. And that means sometimes you're going to make the right decision and lose. It's the same approach in sales. We want to be spending more time on higher probability, higher value. Keep in mind that when you're looking at a sales situation and you're looking at the value of an opportunity and the probability, larger value opportunities almost always start off with lower probabilities, and spending time on those is really worth it. One of the problems, and we've got some other material if you want to know about it, just let us know. We'll share an example of win rate analysis. Actually, you can get that example if you sign up for our course on building your growth model. But one of the things that we've seen is for the vast majority of sales organizations that we've studied, and we've studied a lot of really good ones, the win rate based on quantity of opportunities is about 2 times more or greater than the win rate on the value of that opportunity, the revenue opportunity. One of the main causes for that is because the metrics that we're using value certainty. So we will spend more time on something that shows a 90% chance of winning a $100,000 opportunity than a 10% chance on winning $1 million opportunity, right? If you look at those two things, the value of those opportunities of the first one is $90,000. The value of the second is $100,000. But we're going to spend a whole lot more time on that $90,000 because it appears to be more certain. It's further into the process. It's going to show up quicker. That $1 million opportunity, not only is it only a 10% chance, but it's also going to take more time. So before it shows up on any leaderboard, before it shows up for my sales manager to say to me, why aren't you doing anything, Doug? Before it shows up there, right? I might, who knows, I might lose my job, right? And so we end up putting more time to lower value opportunities because they represent greater certainty. And so they show stronger for close rates, for win rates, for sales cycle times, for cost of customer acquisition, and so forth, right? So those components need to come together to balance that out. Right? And so when you look at sales velocity, when we look at creating a balanced metric, we do want to take a look at it through 2 different disciplines in the sales world today. One area is what we refer to as market development. Very often it's referred to as sales development or business development. It's basically the discovery process, right? And so here's a very typical discovery process. Here's a very typical sales development process, right? We reach out to people, we get engaged in conversation, we have an active conversation. You'll see that, it becomes an active conversation once we have that first meaningful conversation. We identify if there are issues at play, what we call high probability indicators. Are there problems that we can address? There's some level of ongoing dialogue. We make sure that we get to authority. Then we have a sales qualified lead, right? Then that gets turned over to the account executive. Now, this process can manifest over multiple conversations, multiple months, years potentially, or it can happen in 20 minutes. It really depends on what sales game you're playing, what sales model you're implementing, what your product is, where your customer's coming from, what's happening, etc. But basically, this is what goes into creating a sales qualified lead. Now, if you're a sales development rep, you're probably measured on how many sales qualified leads do you have, right? And so you're pushing for sales qualified leads. But realize you're not the reason. And I'm not saying you don't contribute to the reason, but you're not the reason that that someone becomes a sales qualified lead. They've got to play their part too. If there's no need, there's no sales qualified lead. And one of the things that I've seen, especially for companies that aren't the dominant player or companies that have higher average sale value components, is they run by tremendous value because the timing's not right. Because development, it's kind of funny, development's a key word in the titles, right? Everyone calls it something different, but the commonality is development. But the metrics that we use don't measure development. They only measure, again, the output. How many sales qualified leads do you get? So what we realized was, how do we know how well a rep is doing towards optimizing the asset that we give them, meaning the leads that they're managing? How well are they doing in optimizing that? And this is where we came up with the lead management or the sales development velocity, or what I'm about to show you, lead management points, right? And so there's certain key things that have to happen, right? You have to be able to connect with somebody, right? Now, by no means am I saying, a connect alone means success, but I don't care how many calls you make. I care about how many connects do you have. And if I can get you to be maybe a little bit more creative in how to get more connects, one way is just make more calls. Another way might be spend a little bit more time on the emails that I'm writing, or leave a better voicemail, or engage the assistant to learn more and be able to customize my outreach, right? So a connect is worth 5 points in this situation. Now you can determine whatever your point value is. A meaningful conversation, every meaningful conversation you have is worth 10 points, right? So it goes back to that definition. If you have one of those, you get 10 points. If you schedule or book a meeting, that's worth 5 points. If the meeting's held, that's worth 5 more points. When it advances to that EQL status, right, which is stage 3 of the pipeline that I just showed you. So when you get to that, we've now identified a high probability indicator. We've identified an area that we address. That's worth 10 points, right? And so now as I develop opportunities, I get points. It shows up. I've got a leaderboard that I can show up to. And I can tell you, if you take a look at the hours that you want your sales development reps to be spending working on direct outreach, and you were to figure out what the output is that you need to be able to drive your overall sales process, you would be able to calculate and design this type of point system where, so long as they're doing quality work, these efforts will lead to high probabilities of getting the output that we want. And if they're generating those points, but they're not getting the outcome, then it tells you that you've got a coaching issue. You've got to work on improving the quality, or maybe you've got a bad assumption in what the conversion rates really ultimately lead to, or maybe you've got a market message fit issue, right? But now, instead of the rep only being able to focus on the result of their actions, they can actually focus in on the quality of their actions. And again, I want to emphasize, these all require quality actions. The only one that I guess it doesn't is a connect. Right, but this way, if I get a connect and they tell me get lost, hey, that didn't feel good, but at least I got 5 points. Right? A meaningful conversation has has a specific objective definition. They have to be able to demonstrate that. Right, so that drives better output. Now, what we also do is we add a series of bonus points. So like this is the core effort, and the reason we refer to this as core is, we're able to find out, is a rep doing what they're supposed to be doing? How well are they using their time? If they can't hit certain point thresholds here, then we probably have issues around potentially rep ability. So that means we either need to do coaching, or we need to determine that there's not a match for the position. The bonus efforts really get into the higher quality things that enable you to move forward. Right. So this is from ours. This is our actual lead management point system here. Every time we identify a challenge, right, which typically has a connection to a meaningful conversation, but each issue, and we've got a, in our playbook, we define what meets that criteria of a challenge. That's worth 2 points. For every sales qualified lead that's accepted, that's worth 15 points. That's success. You won. We run webinars very often. So for each person that you get registered to a webinar, you get a point. For each person that attends the webinar, you get 5 points. We are massive users of video. And one of the challenges that we see across the board is getting salespeople to use video. What's the best way to get them to use video? Give them points. Every 15 minutes of video that's watched by a targeted persona is worth 5 points. We have a community we call the Sales Genius Network that has some value to it. So if a rep gets someone to sign up for the Sales Genius Network, that's worth 2 points. Right? Here's what happens. Right? All of a sudden, I don't have to direct a rep for what to do. It creates a psychological term called agency. I now know that I need to create points. I'm going to show you how, what the objective is in a minute. But different reps come in and decide to play their games differently. So we see one rep that comes in and they're, you know what, I'm going to hit big opportunities. I'm going to hit them hard. I'm going to hit them fast. I'm going for connects, meaningful conversations and advances, and I'm going to power them through. We see somebody else coming in saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to use video and I'm going to get people registering for webinars, and they kind of get bits and pieces of points together. What the cool thing is as long as they get the score, the output is pretty equivalent, right? So here's what we tell reps on a daily basis. You should be generating 125 points. That again, this is our system. You should generate 125 points. Now, if you're below 80 points, that's red. We got a problem. Now, are you going to have some 80-point days? Are you going to have some 50-point days? Yeah, of course you are. Right? But success, winning, is 125 points. Superstar, 175 points. If you're between 80 and 125, you're in the yellow zone. This is what we're shooting for on a daily basis. Now, what we care even more about, the weekly basis. Right? We're shooting 625-point weeks. I come in, this is what I know now. I got to figure out, how do I get 625 points? How am I going to do it? From a coaching standpoint, all of a sudden, we're not beating people up about process. Like, one of the biggest things that I've seen is we all have a tendency as managers or coaches to try to coach reps to do it the way we did it. As opposed to, let's let the rep figure out how they want to run their territory, how they want to run their system. So we're all on the same page about what each of those actions, what each of those inputs are worth. Now, I'll tell you, when you start talking about point values for things, it's a really strategic conversation, because you now, as a selling organization, not even to the salesperson, you really have to think about what are the things that create opportunities. So now, yeah, we're still tracking sales cycle time. We're still tracking closed revenue. We're still, especially for full account execs, yeah, the commission's on closing the business. There's no problem there. But we also now have a scoreboard for what are we doing on early stage activities. Now, I show you this. These are the numbers for a senior sales development rep in our system. So this is somebody working that part of the process full time. When we work with companies that have full cycle account executives, we all know one of the biggest issues with them is they don't spend enough time prospecting, especially they don't spend enough quality time prospecting. Well, we adjust the point total. So yeah, they're still responsible for closing business. They still have a quota number that they have to hit. But they also have a market development or a prospecting or whatever you want to call it, point quota that they have to hit. And now we're able to see, hey, if they're hitting their one business quota, but they're not hitting their market development quota, then you know what? That might be why our cost of customer acquisition is higher. That might be why we have bumpier months. That might be why there's less consistency, right? So we're able to identify and balance out those actions so that we're building predictability and impact throughout our entire sales process. And we're leveraging our assets far, far better. Now, here's an example of, now this is our sales process. This is a little bit old now, but this is, direct from our playbook. And what you'll see here is that, we have certain exit criteria. So a company gets into our active sales process and they have to meet this criteria. That's the engagement phase. That's basically what we just showed. That's the discovery part. Then we have a diagnosis phase. They have to meet these criteria and so forth. Now, I will tell you that the most valuable action for us is when we complete the diagnosis phase with a right fit prospect, right? This phase is what causes sales for us. This is where opportunities are unlocked. And by the way, if we don't actively participate in diagnosis, it leads to a lot less predictability for us. And by the way, not just from a sales perspective, but also from a success perspective. We have more service issues. We have more client management issues when we don't fully conduct a diagnosis. But here again, the problem that we had was the only thing we measured was how much business did we win. So now what we do is we assign point values as you move through the process, right? So to make this maybe a little bit easier for you to see, When you complete the engagement process, so when you have an account that gets through the engagement process, you get 35 points. When it completes the diagnosis process, you get 60 points. When you're through the solution design process, you get 35 points. When you've made the proposal or delivered our report of findings, you get 25 points. And when they make a decision, you get 10 points. Right? Now, you'll see that we actually, more than 50% of the points come before solution design. This is what causes sales for us. Right? If we're not driving this part of the activity, if we're not increasing our velocity here, it's harder and harder for us to hit our numbers. Right? So now we're able to take a look on a point-based system to balance out those other signals. We also provide action points here as well. We have a tool that we use called the demand generation profile. When that's completed, because by the way, I've got the data that shows when we have that completed, it increases the probability of sales. And when we have more than one person completed at a prospect, it further increases the probability. So the rep gets 10 points for a profile being completed, plus an additional point for each person that completes it, up to a maximum of 10 points. If they get the tech stack profile completed, they get 5 points. Now, by the way, this is a profile that can be completed by the prospect themselves. And if the prospect fills it out on their own, they get the points. If I walk you through it and I fill it out for you as the salesperson, so long as you legitimately got the information from the prospect, you get the same points. Right? It doesn't matter to us how you do it, what works better for you. Right? One of the key components in our sales is when we start helping people understand what their economic model drivers are, like what really drives results. And so when this is presented to key personas, they get 5 points per key persona, up to a maximum of 20 points. Here again, by the way, they can deliver this in person. We also have video options, or they can record a video themselves if it needs to be customized to be delivered. We don't tell you to use video. The rep decides if they're going to use video or not. But what you see here is the point value system makes it easier for that video to be used. Like one of the things I noticed early on, if I spend 30 minutes figuring out how to get 5 different companies and 5 people, and 2 people at each of those companies to watch a video, my sales manager doesn't see any activity. And so they're going to come to me and they're going to say, Doug, what are you doing with your 30 minutes of time? Why aren't you talking to somebody? And I go, well, I was having them watch video. And most managers I know, they go, no. I need you talking to me. Right? Without realizing it, we disincentivize that behavior. But when we put points on it, now there's no question. Am I using my time or am I not using my time? Now note, it's not you get the points if you send a video to somebody. It's you get the points if they watch the video. Anytime we make an insight presentation, we've got a series of presentations around specific areas. You get 5 points per key persona for that. By the way, some of those are on video, some of them aren't. Any of them can be presented live. Blog posts that are read. We had one situation, we were rolling this out to a client, and a senior rep said, okay, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to have 10 people at my client read a blog post. Does that mean I get 10 points? The answer was, yeah, you do. Guess what? That's socializing. That's spreading your message. That's generating more interaction, more engagement from everybody. Yeah, that's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to win business. And you get 2 points for each meaningful conversation. Right? So now we're able to have a balanced scorecard between the two, or balanced scoreboard between the two. Closed business. Are we contributing to closed business? And then further, we're able to assess how well is a rep performing. Are they getting better? Now this gets a little bit complicated, but overall what we're talking about here is how many points did you get in a period times what your key economic metric is. Now, for most people, that's going to be value of the deal. But I know a lot of companies say in SaaS that they're user-based. So they're trying to drive users. I know some companies that it's just number of companies. So the key economic metric is 1. right? So we all have different metrics. It might be ARR, MRR. It could be users. It could be gross profit. Whatever your key economic metric is. And then you're going to multiply that, if this makes sense for you, by a key economic metric factor. And what we recommend here, like, the point of this is $5 million opportunity is probably not worth 5 times 5 $1 million opportunities. So this key economic metric factor is really for more of the advanced optimization, so that, again, you're keeping a balanced pipeline. Or in one situation, we had, this isn't unusual, by the way, a mid-market customer was their core target customer. They did business with larger companies, but for them, larger was not better. It was that core mid-market customer. So for them, actually, a $500,000 opportunity was actually worth more to them for their strategy than a $1.2 million opportunity was. And so, the other thing that happens when you're not tracking this type of thing is that reps tend to gravitate towards, we put larger opportunities in our pipeline, and then we work the smaller, more certain opportunities. We kind of end up getting the worst of both worlds. I'm not saying that as a cynic. I've got a lot of data. If you're curious, I can share that with you. So that, and then you divide that by your key economic metric. That determines what your full point value is. And then your velocity is determined by what the growth of those points are. Now, here's my recommendation. Don't worry about the velocity formula initially. Just start tracking points. You'll start seeing very quickly, you'll see where the bottlenecks are for each one of your reps and for your organization overall, simply by doing that. Then as you begin to understand that, as you begin to master that, then move a little bit more towards this advanced metric that can become what will likely be your number one lead indicator for customer and revenue growth. That sales velocity, thinking differently about how we're managing our sales teams, is crucial if we're going to win in the future, if we're going to be able to put our resources in place effectively. If you have any questions about this presentation or anything else, simply give us a response. Chat with us on this page. Likely, if you're on one of our pages with this video, you'll see a chat, a schedule a meeting, or simply a place to ask a question. Feel free to do any of those. If we can be any help in your growth journey, don't hesitate to reach out. Until next time, go out and be a sales genius. Thanks for joining me.